As a young harpsichord maker, you just about cannot escape Frank Hubbard. Even today, anybody who puts together a kit or goes about building his own instruments has Frank Hubbard looking over your shoulder. He wrote the fundamental text, the 3 centuries of harpsichord making. But more than that, there was this influence of Frank Hubbard and William Dowd that were going back to the antecedent of what the harpsichord is and was, and tried to make something that was as good as the antiques that they worked on and they studied.
Hello and welcome to the Charles River Museum of Industry and Innovation. My name is Steve Guerrero and I'm the Director of Education here at the museum. First of all, thank you for coming out, and thank you to our panelists and moderator for what I know will be an enjoyable and informational evening. I'm really excited to have Laura Carlo, that you may know from GBH Classical in 99.5. She's going to moderate our discussion. We also have Mark Kroll, renowned harpsichordist for the BSO and professor emeritus at Boston University, which I know is a very good school, because I went there. We also have Allan Winkler, who has worked as a harpsichord builder and woodworker, various media, with the North Bennett Street School, but now on your own workshop. Or are you still with the North Bennett?
I teach there a couple of weeks out of the year.
Great, awesome. And Henrik Broekman, who is a long-time harpsichord builder, player, and specialist, who was here on site working at the Hubbard Harpsichord factory in that Picker building, and has the photos to prove it. And so we're looking for a wonderful discussion about how Frank and Diane Hubbard, and the shop that they built alongside William Dowd and Eric Hertz as other builders in this area, essentially revived early music through this very special instrument, the harpsichord, which in the 60s and 70s actually had a moment as DIY kits that you would order and build in your own home, pioneered by folks like Henrik and the Hubbards. So without further ado, I'm going to turn over to tonight's moderator, Laura Carlo. Laura.
Thank you. Before we begin, the Iranian-American harpsichordist Mahan Esfahari once famously said, "Well, a harpsichord is a kind of a big guitar, isn't it? I mean, it's plucked, after all." I don't know how our panelists feel about that, but we are sure going to find out. We're going to be discussing the legacy of Hubbard Harpsichords of Waltham. It was not just an instrument manufacturer, it was a manufacturing company here in Waltham. And I started at WCRB in Waltham a few years ago. And we had a very close connection with this museum from when I started there until we moved to Brighton. And I just, Stephen, I love everything you've done. It's just amazing. It is a beautiful treasure. And yes, I think manufacturing and laboring in the mills needs to be celebrated, as well as fine paintings and sculptures. All right, so we're talking about Hubbard in particular, and maybe we could start with you, Henrik, about your days as foreman there, and how did you come to what was then Hubbard and Dowd's facility?
My career, such as it is, started as a player. I was studying in New York at the Mannes College of Music, and for the first 2 years I was a theory major. But they had a little harpsichord there. Well, at least it plucked, so maybe it was just a guitar. And it seemed logical enough to me to take care of, and I did, and in the way of rabbit holes, it became a thing for me. I was offered the opportunity to accompany Sylvia Marlowe, who became my harpsichord teacher, on a USIA tour of South America. Well, Argentina, Uruguay, and Brazil. I think 1965. And as part of our discussions, we arranged that I would take lessons and that she would try to find a berth for me at one of the Boston shops so that I could learn more about the trade and take care of her two instruments as part of the payment for my tuition, which I got free from her Harpsichord Music Society. She only taught under those conditions. She asked at the Dowd shop, but it was late in the season and the Dowd shop was full. She then asked at the Hertz shop, and that was available. Well, so there was my first summer working in harpsichords when I was either 19 or 20 years old. I arrived in Boston with a very natty set of white corduroy jeans, and I was put to work sanding by hand a mahogany lid, which turned them a deep orange, which never went away. And well, I could have turned it off right then, but no, I persisted. Came back several summers and actually spent a year away from Manus to work for Eric. Till finally, through one thing and another, it became clear that my career, the way forward as a player was barred to me, and I would have to be a maker full-time and a player part-time. So shortly after that decision was made, or about that time, I met my wife. Well, we had known each other, and we had been singing together. And after a summer spent shingling a barn in Vermont, I had arranged a job at Hubbard's, and the rest is history. And the greatest privilege I had was actually intersecting with Frank Hubbard himself.
Can you tell us a little bit about him?
He was well, no less a polarizing figure than David Way, who these two folks will know, who was the person who took over Zuckerman harpsichords, called Frank a polarizing figure. So he was a lightning rod. He was quick to anger and even quicker to forgive. He always relished the idea that one of his workers or acolytes had gained some insight that made him very happy. Unlike at Eric's, where work was very stratified, with Frank, it was not. At Eric's, I would do the voicing, and that's kind of how I sold myself to Frank. But I would just get the jacks, I'd get all the mechanism together, and I would be allowed to you know, just do minor assembly and fine work. At the Hubbard shop, I had to put everything together. It was his feeling that the person who has to make it work should have that responsibility from the beginning, and one gains a great deal of insight from doing so.
How many years were you with him?
2 years, more or less. And it was brought to an end by following my wife to her next employment as a resident, a medical resident up at the Dartmouth-Hitchcock system. So I had 7 years of my own shop in and around Lebanon, New Hampshire, where I made something like 16 or 17 instruments, always with the specter of Frank at my shoulder. I'm fond of saying that the one thing that we couldn't put in any of the kit directions was Frank's wrinkled nose and exasperated sigh when somehow you had failed. But once experienced, that lived with you. And so I summoned his specter many times and tried to live up to and escape that experience.
Allan, you are in the same business. Tell us about your career and how you came to know Hubbard.
Well, I got into this basically by apprenticing with Eric Hertz, who also worked for Hubbard and Dowd back in the early 50s, yes. And
Eric moved to Cambridge, right?
Eric had a workshop in Cambridge, on Howard Street in Cambridge, and I got to know him because he was a next-door neighbor of mine, and through a joint
well, your parents were his landlords.
His landlord.
Yes.
You're spoiling the whole story. He was the next-door neighbor, and through a common devotion and passion for sailing, we went sailing a few times in his jolly boat. I didn't allow it to capsize, which I count very high. That's probably why he hired me. But I worked for Eric for 6 years, and the closest I got to knowing Frank Hubbard was one day when he came into the workshop, Eric Hertz's workshop, and there was this is Frank Hubbard, folks, and Frank turned around and waved to everybody in the workshop, and then went into Eric's office and they had their powwow. But that was I started with Eric in 1971, and I left in 1977 to make my own instruments. And I never actually, unfortunately, Frank died before I got a chance to really interface with him, but I know Henrik very well, and thankfully Henrik has always been the most pleasant and helpful of colleagues you can imagine, as was Diane Hubbard, the second wife of Frank Hubbard. And to this day, well, I should say, as a young harpsichord maker, you just about cannot escape Frank Hubbard. Even today, anybody who puts together a kit or goes about building his own instruments has Frank Hubbard looking over your shoulder. He wrote the fundamental text, the 3 centuries of harpsichord making. But more than that, there was this influence of Frank Hubbard and William Dowd that were going back to the antecedent of what the harpsichord is and was, and tried to make something that was as good as the antiques that they worked on and they studied. So that's my story. I stopped taking orders for new instruments about 5 years ago, and I still have a couple of legacy orders, but I'm basically working in repairing and restoring instruments, and also teaching harpsichord voicing and regulation at the North Bennett Street School in the summers. That's my story.
Mark, everybody knows who Mark Kroll is, and I have had the distinct pleasure of hearing you in concert as well. You have played on a Hubbard harpsichord.
Yes.
Tell us about that versus others that you have played?
Which one?
Any of them.
I've been playing for 55 years. And I must have played on 1,000 harpsichords of all kinds. And the nice thing about being a harpsichordist, there is something nice about being a harpsichordist, is each harpsichord is different, even by the same maker.
No?
And either it's based on a different kind of historical model of French, various French, Blanchet or Toscan, some of the great names if you know those, or English or Italian, or just none at all. Or, unfortunately, when I first started playing, many harpsichords were based on harpsichords that never existed. Thank God they are now as extinct as those dinosaurs. But I always knew when I'm traveling around that I said, what kind of harpsichord do you have? And in the old days, and this goes back to the 60s for me now, there weren't that many places that had a harpsichord. So I bought a 1967 Pontiac Executive Safari 9-passenger station wagon. You can see it on my webpage. And it fit a French double, and my wife and partner, 55 years, Carol Lieberman, in the 2 seats, but she's a violinist, and we played together, and it took us everywhere. By the 70s, things got much, much better, and you could fly to places and not try to put a harpsichord in a storage bin. That was a joke. You never knew exactly what you were getting or what condition it was in, but I could always at least come with a sense of optimism that if it was a Hubbard or a Dowd, things would be okay.
Wow. Waltham-based.
Waltham-based yes, exactly. It came from here, or what's the name?
Cambridge.
Before that,
They were.
Lyman Estate?
They started
the
out.
estate, the Lyman Estate, various places, as you know, it's listed there, but and came and went all over the world, and if it was there, I was going to be able to at least play have a chance to play. Any fault of playing badly was mine.
With pianos, and that's the instrument that I started with at 6 years old, there's the big debate if an old piano is worth keeping or if you should put it in the fireplace. Because it costs so much money to rebuild the action. What is the feeling on harpsichords?
Well, you do know that during the French Revolution, shortly afterwards, it was some cold winters, they needed to make fires. And it breaks my heart, but they used the harpsichords for firewood. Because at that time, the piano was taking over, and it was also a different kind of political situation as well. It all depends. Some pianos from the 19th century are priceless. And also from the 20th century. Piano making is a marvelous art that is still a marvelous art by many builders. If you could find a Steinway B from the 1920s, please don't burn it. And many others like that as well. The difference with pianos, though, and harpsichords, for those, I'm sure everybody owns a harpsichord here, right? But at least with a piano, you knew you were going to get something with the same number of keys, and the space between the octaves was identical almost all the time. And the action would be sort of reminiscent of what you practiced on. Not with a harpsichord. You could have a range of G to D, F to F, G short octave, I won't get into that now, E, G to G, I mean, and then the keys could be different sizes as well. So it was always an adventure. Because remember, there was no Steinway in the 17th and 18th century. And so each national style, which is wonderful, produced its kind of harpsichord, and each century of each national style. So a French harpsichord from 1650 is very different from a French harpsichord of 1750. It's both exciting and terrifying when you're traveling.
I mean, historically, I know that Italian harpsichords were very light instruments. And then the Netherlands harpsichords were heavy, and you knew that you were standing in front of a harpsichord. Is there a preference as a performer, what type you are playing on?
Yes. We want all the notes to work. Don't take it for granted. 2, you want it to be in good regulation, and don't take that for granted. And I have spent many hours before recital not sitting with my feet up, but re-quilling a harpsichord or readjusting various things. It's fine. I chose the best instrument anybody could ever have. And harpsichord, when you say the Flemish are heavy,
Yeah.
not really. Some German instruments are heavy, but nothing compared to a piano or the modern 1900 to 1940 harpsichord, which was based on a piano construction. And Frank Hubbard had this great line when he talked about these instruments. He said, they had the strange desire to reinvent the piano, these harpsichord villains. Beautifully put. Things are so much better now with guys like Allan and Henrik, because they build harpsichords. Not only that, are light, beautifully constructed, voicing is great until there's a change in humidity, and they sound very much, if not better perhaps sometimes, than the 16th, 17th, and 18th century models on which they are based. So it's the last 40 years has been heaven for a harpsichordist.
Henrik, when you started with Frank Hubbard, I think the historically informed performances were starting to take root, which is probably why this area had so many shops. Who was he making the harpsichords for?
I think, as Mark alluded to, most of the harpsichords, based on models that never existed, came from Europe. At the time I got into the racket, the choice one had was to buy a harpsichord made by old world craftsmen, or some guy in a garage who was privy to who knows what they based their design on. There were several American makers who had taken it upon themselves to make the bomb-proof harpsichord. John Chalice and some of his followers. They're made on a aluminum honeycomb frame. They are absolutely stable in tuning as long as you can maintain their temperature. I remember once I was doing a tuning session for Miss Marlowe, And it was a hot day in New York. It was in a ballroom of a hotel on Broadway. And the air conditioners around the gallery were going full blast. I had to tune. Then the band came in, and the air conditioners went off, and the pitches started to go crazy.
Wow.
So I was kept busy retuning and retuning and retuning. Point taken, never do that again. But again, your question?
Well, did you want to jump in at this point?
Just briefly, if I may. Allan first?
No.
Just, you have to understand, most of you know again, but so remember, you all own harpsichords, right? Unlike the piano, which is now braced with a very heavy iron frame and various other things that keep the instrument from moving around too much. Harpsichords and even pianos well into the mid-19th century were all wood. And you know what happens when the humidity changes in your furniture. You can't open the drawer. Well, imagine if you have a piece of spruce this thin, and then a pine, and they're all moving simultaneously. And it's an adventure. And it didn't change after the harpsichords. I've written a lot about the 19th century pianists too, and there's a great stories. For example, Franz Liszt never played a harpsichord, but he was playing a piano, and he was playing recital, and the review said, at intermission, the piano dropped a fourth out of tune. But fortunately, they had two other pianos backstage. Another time, they had to go all the way across Paris to get a tuner. So these wood instruments, they're so sonorous. That's why they're so beautiful. The whole instrument is vibrating. Nothing is holding it in place. And may I add one more thing? I always think of the great line about lutenists. There was a nasty comment in the 16th century which said, a lutenist spends half his life tuning and the other half playing out of tune. Not with these guys' harpsichords, but the lutenist.
Well, the other quip is the Renaissance would have taken half as long if they hadn't had the lutes to tune.
That's why so many people have suggested we ask the Pope to make Carrier a saint.
I wanted to jump in on what Mark was saying about instruments that you go out in the field and find, and in earlier years, probably back in the 60s and 70s, the itinerant harpsichordist will go out and find something that was almost unplayable. Why? Because it wasn't probably very carefully made in the first place. Shop training was a difficult thing to come by in those early years. But later on, there were harpsichords that just sat unused, sitting in a church or some other venue, and the poor harpsichordist had to come along and try and get this thing to play an epic recital in about 24 hours, and they would sit there, in front of the instrument, getting it regulated and getting all the notes to play and getting it in tune. Well, now that I'm basically retired from actively building instruments, one of the things that I'm doing is trying to pass along this information. In the old days, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you could walk down Commonwealth Avenue, shake a tree, and a couple of harpsichord makers would fall out. You could find shop-trained technicians just about anywhere, just about. Nowadays, not so much. 25 years on from sort of the heyday, the big revival, where harpsichord makers had, 2, 3, 4, 5-year waiting lists, not so much anymore. These older instruments are coming back into the market. The second market for these instruments is turning around, and regulating, getting them, part of what I'm doing is trying to train people, piano technicians mostly, since they're the people that are involved in taking care of the instruments that are at schools. But getting them trained in how to care for these instruments, getting them back up playing. Quite often you find nowadays in larger music schools, if you're a piano major, you've got to take a year of one other keyboard. Harpsichord is the usual suspect. or organ or clavichord. But this is something that I'm trying to address in my second career. This is an ad for what I teach at North Bennett Street, in case nobody noticed that. Well, a couple of weeks out of the year, yeah.
Have you ever played a 2-manual harpsichord, Mark?
Yes.
Daily.
I never understood what the top keyboard was. No. Do you know what they do? I never, it's too high.
Yeah.
I've never seen one.
Oh, no.
In person.
Basically, you all know, harpsichords came in all shapes, sizes, and some had 2 keyboards, some had 1. Few even had 3. No, and no 4-manual harpsichords.
None that I know of.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
We all said the same thing. No, not playing, tuning them.
Yeah.
But I guess if a Steinway type piano is the concert piano, for better or for worse, a 5-octave instrument built on French design, don't get angry everybody who likes, it's not the best, it's a different sound, has become sort of the standard concert harpsichord. Why? Because it plays everything except for about 7 Scarlatti sonatas, which go up to G. And so it's always great to have those 5 octaves and 3 registers, and there are lots of them. There's so many now. There's so many good builders all over the country, and Europe and Asia and China. There's some good builders too I played on. So it's better now. I wish I weren't retiring.
Henrik, when you were with the Hubbard facility here, how many people were working here at the time?
Well, when I got here, the company was 20, which was quite a lot. And that was parceled between 2 facilities, the Picker building here and the Lyman Street shop. Well, actually, that's when I came back in 1979. When I was first here in 1970, there was just the Lyman Street shop. And then my guess is we were 10 or 12 at most. Mostly dilettantes, a couple of lifers, or people who turned out to be lifers. Some blue-collar sorts. Frank had one employee that he hired directly out of North Bennett Street, Richard Vertuccio.
Yeah, Vertuccio, yeah.
Yeah, who had the misfortune, or maybe it was the superpower, of being deaf. Totally deaf. But he was a fantastic cabinet maker. And you knew that he'd smoke a stogie down to the nub, and there would be this cloud of smoke, and the thicker the cloud, the harder he was working. But he was an irascible soul, hard to deal with. When I first got to the shop, I was biking every day from Jamaica Plain.
Oh, wow.
And I made my bones with him by being able to jump and touch the ceiling in the shop, just on the basis of the exercise I'd gotten. And then later on, I was installed as, when I was in 1972, I was foreman. Then I left and came back as technical director. I was his supervisor, and you needed a light hand to deal with Richie. But in the early 70s, it was a lot of recent graduates. But we had a refugee from a Maine paintbrush handle factory, We had a son of a National Academy of Sciences laureate. We had the son of a Nobel laureate. We had a doctor who financed all his projects by doing physicals and no other care. And just various odd peoples. There was this fellow who only spoke French and lived out in the garden and ate the dandelion greens he could get out of the lawn, all the while looking like Rasputin. We had a fellow who would bike every day from Concord, and his personal hair shirt was that his bike didn't have a seat.
Frank Roquette.
Frank Roquette.
Yep.
Yep. And others who will go unnamed or unmentioned.
Just thought I'd slip this in. Were there any women working in any of these facilities?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't say she was a receptionist.
Oh, no.
No. Certainly, I think the Dowd shop was more integrated than ours. But the administration of the Hubbard shop, the administration was women. And
The Hurt shop.
a lot of,
I'm sorry.
well,
Ruth
it
McKay?
depended. When Tony was alive, she helped. But, and every once in a while we would have women helpers at the Hurt shop. Bob Brink's daughter, Sarah, worked there for a while. Let's see. And we had our shipping department was women. But in terms of women cabinet makers, no.
I should mention, Ruth McKay was at the Hurt shop. Ruth McKay was at the Hurt shop, and she
That's later. Yeah.
And she from my recital here, she tuned the
Yeah.
harpsichord. Isn't that nice? Yeah.
Ruth McKay, I'm sorry, Sue Reed was a cabinet maker at the Dowd shop. I mean,
Yeah.
they were interspersed. There was a representation, but not a plurality, certainly, of women in harpsichord making. There's still, actually, there is more and more.
Well, Lynette
Chang.
Chong, yeah.
Lynette Chang.
Since retired, but anyway.
Independent harpsichord builder builds a beautiful mother and child. Do you know what a mother and child virginals is? Yeah. And among other things too. She was a wonderful builder. She stopped building though, right? She
I believe so.
went to something more lucrative.
Some time ago, yeah.
Well, for the audience, the mother and child is the original two-manual harpsichord. So you take this little 4-foot pitched instrument and you put it on top of the big instrument, and the jacks of the lower instrument come up and raise the keys of the upper instrument, so that one of the sets of keys is down here and the other is up here. So it's not what we think of today as a modern double manual, but it was a double manual.
I noticed on the display, the exhibit that we have outside this conference room, the intricate painting, and it's just beautiful. I mean, you don't see that done on pianos. What about the artistry of harpsichords?
That's an interesting story. Frank tended to run a very insular shop and try to keep everything in shop. So consequently, for a while, he had a fellow named Steve Lowry, who was actually the son of the Nobel laureate, working for him, and he did soundboard painting and in-painting of antique soundboards. At the same time, Bill Dowd had identified, or it had been revealed to him, that on Beacon Hill there was this wonderful artist named Sheridan German. You might look at it and say Germain, but she went by German, who would paint for all comers. This put Frank in a flutter, that he didn't want anything to do with a woman of such loose virtue. But one of my very first commissions was for an instrument not only with a soundboard painting, but totally done in chinoiserie on the outside and inside. And I had to swallow Frank's gum and go and apply and see if she would, Sheridan would do this, take this commission. She did, and the instrument is still playing and can be heard on YouTube recently.
What you noticed in these pictures in the modern, I won't say replicas, based on the historical instruments, is that the harpsichord was a gorgeous piece of furniture in the 17th and 18th century. And it would be rare, if very rare, to see a harpsichord with no decoration. And of course, the 18th century French instruments were Louis XIV and XV was in that style. The Italians did not decorate their instruments, but they put them into little cases to protect them, and those cases were often heavily decorated. And so to have a harpsichord built on historical principles, as we say now, we must have, or we should, not must, but it's wonderful to have the decoration as well on the soundboard. And if you can afford a chinoiserie, that would be my choice as well.
We have just enough time for a few questions. Does anybody have a question for any of our panelists, sir?
Within the last week, I've come across a reference to a Frank Hubbard portative organ used in 1958 by Dan Pinkham.
Wow.
Any idea, did he make it or did he get it from somewhere?
1958.
Who's this?
Hubbard, 1958
The date seems
organ.
odd to me, but in fact,
I didn't know that.
the Hubbard company acted as an agent for the Flentrop company, an American agent, and we sold kits. In fact, one of the earliest Flentrop kits was sold to Allan Kay at the Palo Alto Research Center, who was able to get our 1979 rewrite of the kit manual done totally by computer. It was gorgeous. And we weren't able to do that for another 8 or 9 years. But finally, the technology came to the rest of us.
Hi, thanks. I'm curious about the different production streams for the kits versus for finished instruments. Was there, if the shop was making finished instruments at the same time as kits, were there finished instruments basically take the parts from the kit and finish an instrument, or was it a completely separate production method used to make a finished instrument versus a kit?
Very good question. The company grew after I left. At the first instance, I left in 1972. And between that and my return in 1979, Frank took a partner, Larry Erdman, and he was the one who was responsible for identifying the space in the Picker building as a facility for moving the kit production to. Before then, kit production was helter-skelter in with finished instrument production. Of course, kits are entirely different. In some ways, they're far more difficult to make than the finished instruments themselves, because the person who's going to assemble it is not there to do the final on-site assembly. It has to go ready to be assembled. So for a while, the two facilities were entirely separate. When we were unceremoniously kicked out of Lyman Street by the Society for New England Antiquities, Society for the Preservation of Spinia, we came to the Picker building, and the kits were on the 3rd floor and we were on the 2nd floor. And the two hardly met. Every once in a while, we would get an order for a finished kit, and then we'd get the parts and put it together. It was just an easier build, given the precision that had been lavished on it on the 3rd floor. When we finally had to move everything onto the same floor, still, we had to maintain the two very different approaches to production. Kits would be made by a collection of people, and a finished instrument would generally be made by one workman. In the case of Richard Vertuccio, it would be like pulling teeth. But from if the workman doing it was Achille Cristiano, who came from the Dowd shop, I'd always look over at his bench, and there he'd be, sitting reading the paper. And before you knew it, there was a harpsichord there. How he did it, I don't know, but bless the man, he did it, and they were wonderful.
To another industry which Henrik used when they sent out kits. Rudolph and then John Beaver made tools, medical scalpels, which were then used and even sent in boxes with the kit for the assembler to use.
Yeah, that was, I imagine, a happy accident, that they just happened to be their facility happened to be around a mile from the Lyman Street estate. And the knives were easily got. They were very sharp, very durable, very workable, and no one really liked them. And the reason was they were honed on the side that made them usable by lefties. So I had to teach myself to voice left-handed, and they're wonderful.
Perhaps a strange question, but I'm always wondering about, in terms of early music performance, metal strings as opposed to other sort of strings. And I'm wondering, were harpsichords ever non-metal strings? And if so, was there a change? And are there harpsichords made out of something that might not be metal strings now to be historically appropriate, or were they always metal? And on top of that would be, where do you get your metal strings?
Okay. Those contraptions that pluck strings that are not metal are called Lautenwerke. So this idea of a guitar being plucked, it's it's the same sort of thing. As far as we know, the harpsichord could not exist until the technology existed to make metal strings of sufficiently small diameter and sufficiently high tensile strength to withstand the tensions necessary to get a string up to speaking pitch, adequate. The wonderful instruction left over from Thomas Mace is tune the string until it nearly breaks. Nice trick if you can do it.
If I could just add one thing. The Lautenwerk is actually enjoying a brief comeback in popularity with a Hubbard apprentice.
Steve Surley.
Steve Surley,
Yeah, who's out in
Carlisle.
Amherst area.
They're worth going to mess around with. I mean, they're interesting instruments, but I far prefer the metal. Did you answer the metal strings you asked about? They're still being made, and in fact, there's a great deal of research. If you go back 50 years ago, when harpsichords are being strung in what was essentially spring steel wire, nowadays the wire that's being made is considerably more sophisticated, and in its chemical components and also the way that it is drawn. So it is closer to what would have been found in the antique metal strung instruments.
Great, that's what I was wondering about mainly. Did it go through a process of rediscovery?
The harpsichord is to the research and development of what goes into a harpsichord, looking at the extreme details of what makes it all work and how they worked back in the research into the metallurgy of the wire and so on is an ongoing process, and I wish I had another 50 years to go. It's going to be fun.
Thank you, guys.
Yep.
Mark, I have listened to in the past, and I really love it, the E. Power Biggs, Scott Joplin harpsichord playing, and he played a pedal harpsichord. Have you had any experience with a pedal harpsichord, playing one?
Kettle harpsichord?
Pedal.
A pedal harpsichord.
Pedal harpsichord.
What do you mean pedal harpsichord, like a pedal board on an organ, or harpsichords with pedals that change the registers? They're two different.
Actually playing the lower register on by pedal.
I'm sorry, I just came back from London and my
It's
ears
okay.
are still stuffed.
I'm not that familiar with the instrument, but it sounds to me like the lower register is a pedal.
Pedal boards, like organs, yeah. Well, they were made, and also there are a lot of pedal clavichords because churches were cold, and the organist wanted to practice. And so rather than go into a cold church in the 17th, 18th century, they had a rudimentary pedal board where they could practice their pedal work as they were playing on the clavichord, just for practice. But there were also some larger instruments with pedal boards that were plucking a harpsichord. Have you guys ever built one of those?
Yeah,
Hertz made. Eric Hertz made. Eric is left out a little of this conversation, and he shouldn't be. One of the three great builders. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to work on 3 or 4 of them at Eric Hertz's shop. It's just a very large box sits on the floor with strings and keys, and what the experience taught me was how not to make a pedal harpsichord. Because it was noisy.
Just to answer your question, I think the E. Power Biggs recording is on a Hertz pedal harpsichord.
Yeah,
and it's
and
an organ-style pedal
Holiday
board.
for Harpsichord, he called it.
Yeah.
Right?
Also, there's a recording by Anthony Newman on pedal harpsichord, and that's also on one of Eric's. I believe I've made 3. One's in New York, one's in Cambridge, and one's somewhere in Europe. And that, what I took lessons away from that to get something a lot quieter so that every pedal strike didn't get dissipated through the body of the harpsichord that the pedals were playing. But yeah, but in terms of experience playing them, no, I'm not an organist, so it was totally lost on me.
I think our time is up, Stephen. I just wanted to, first of all, thank our three panelists, Henrik Broekman, Allan Winkler, and of course the great internationally renowned Mark Kroll. And thank all of you for braving Memorial Day weekend traffic and the weather tonight. We really appreciate that you came out here. Thank you for giving us a greater appreciation, not only of the harpsichord and what it takes to build, but also the amazing fact that Waltham played such a big role in something that is internationally recognized as a fine instrument. Thank you so much for being part of this tonight, and thank you.